What happens when ambition meets betrayal, when trust is shattered in the most unimaginable way, and when love turns into obsession, leaving behind a trail of lies, disease, and death? This is the story of Harold Cain, a seasoned politician with a lust for power and control. It's the story of his stepson Jordan, a man striving to make a name for himself while unknowingly living in the shadow of deceit. And it's the story of Sophie, a pregnant young woman caught between the two men, one who vowed to love her, and the other who used her in ways that would leave scars no one could see. This is the story of Sophie Demerman. Set against the ruthless, cutthroat world of Chicago politics, everything seemed to be falling into place for Jordan Cain. He had the charm, the vision, and the family name to back him. His pregnant wife Sophie was his rock, the one constant in his chaotic life, and his stepfather Harold was his biggest supporter, a man with decades of experience and a seemingly unshakable reputation. But what Jordan never saw coming was that the very people he trusted the most, the people he loved, were keeping a secret so devastating it would rip his world apart. This is a shocking real-life story that happened here, in our premises. Before we dive into this incredible, heartbreaking story, take a moment to comment below where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories travel and connecting with viewers across the globe. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that will leave you speechless. Your support helps us uncover and share these powerful tales with the world. Now back to the story. What starts as a forbidden affair soon spirals into something far darker. A desperate web of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Sophie's pregnancy, once a source of joy, becomes a ticking time bomb. And when the truth finally comes to light, it sets off a chain of events that ends in heartbreak, scandal, and ultimately, death. How did it all go so wrong? How did a family built on ambition and power crumble under the weight of its own secrets? And how did one woman's tragic story become a cautionary tale about trust, betrayal, and the destructive cost of ambition? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking details of this real-life crime story, a tale of love, lies, and the horrifying consequences of unchecked power. This is a story you won't want to miss. Let's take a moment to meet the people in this tragic tale, individuals whose lives are interwoven in a web of ambition, betrayal, and heartbreak. First, we have Harold Cain, a name that resonates throughout the corridors of power in Chicago. Harold is not just any politician. He is a seasoned master of manipulation. With decades of experience under his belt, he has navigated the murky waters of political life with an ease that leaves others in awe. To the public, he is a charismatic leader, a mentor to many, and a man who knows how to play the game. But beneath that polished exterior lies a darker truth. Harold is driven by an insatiable hunger for power, and he will stop at nothing to maintain his influence. His relationship with his stepson, Jordan, is complex. On the surface, Harold presents himself as the wise guide, offering support and advice as Jordan embarks on his own political journey. But inside, Harold harbors hidden ambitions, viewing Jordan not merely as a son, but as a pawn in his grand political chess game. As Jordan seeks to carve out his own identity, Harold's shadow looms larger, filled with expectations and a desire to control. The love and loyalty they share are soon overshadowed by a betrayal that will change their lives forever. Now, let's turn our attention to Jordan Cain. A young man bursting with charisma and ambition, Jordan is everything a rising politician should be. He has that magnetic quality, the ability to connect with people and inspire them. With dreams of public office dancing in his mind, he is relentless in his pursuit of success. But at the heart of his drive lies his deep love for his wife, Sophie. Their relationship is built on shared dreams and mutual support, a love that seems unshakable. Jordan sees Sophie not just as his partner, but as his anchor in a world that can often feel overwhelming. Yet, as he immerses himself in his campaign, there's a growing emotional distance between them. Jordan becomes so focused on his goals that he fails to notice the cracks forming in their relationship. Instead of being the supportive husband, he unwittingly becomes part of the void in Sophie's life. He is ambitious and determined, but in his pursuit of success, he neglects the very foundation of his happiness, his love for Sophie. Now let's meet Sophie Kane, a woman whose journey through this story is both heartbreaking and complex. Caught in the middle of this tumultuous relationship, she is strong yet vulnerable, hopeful yet desperate. Pregnant and navigating the challenges of impending motherhood, Sophie longs for connection and validation. But as the emotional void between her and Jordan widens, she finds herself increasingly isolated. In her search for comfort, she becomes ensnared by Harold's charm, drawn to the attention and validation he offers. What starts as a seemingly innocent relationship soon spirals into a dangerous affair, fueled by her yearning for affection and understanding. The conflict within her grows as she grapples with her feelings for both men, the love she has for Jordan, and the allure of Harold's power. As we delve deeper into this story, it becomes clear that each of these people are driven by their own desires and ambitions. Their intertwining lives create a narrative filled with tension, betrayal, and ultimately, tragedy. But what will happen when their ambitions collide? How will their choices lead them down a path of destruction? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking events that will forever change their lives and expose the dark side of ambition and trust. Jordan Kane is laser-focused on his campaign, pouring every ounce of his energy into his dreams of public office. He's out there shaking hands, giving speeches, and winning over the hearts of voters. The thrill of ambition drives him, and with each passing day, he feels closer to achieving his goals. But in his relentless pursuit of success, there's a heartbreaking truth that he's neglecting it, a truth that lies within the walls of his own home. Sophie, his pregnant wife, is waiting for him, hoping for his attention, for moments of intimacy that seem to have slipped away in the whirlwind of his campaign. The love they once shared is now overshadowed by long nights apart and silence that fills their home. Sophie watches as Jordan becomes increasingly consumed by his political aspirations, his focus so single-minded that he fails to notice the emotional chasm that is growing between them. She longs for the connection they once had, for the laughter and the warmth of his embrace, but instead, she feels like a distant memory in his busy life. It's during this vulnerable time that Harold, Jordan's stepfather, steps in. With his experience and charm, he senses Sophie's need for support, and in a moment of weakness, he becomes her confidant. Harold presents himself as the caring figure, someone who understands the pressures of political life and the sacrifices it demands. He offers her the attention and validation that she craves, and in those moments, Sophie feels seen and heard. For the first time in a long while, Harold's presence fills the emotional void left by Jordan, drawing her closer to him in ways that she never anticipated. What begins as innocent conversations soon takes a dangerous turn. As they share their fears and insecurities, the lines between comfort and intimacy begin to blur. Sophie finds herself captivated by Harold's charisma, the way he listens so intently and makes her feel important. She's drawn into his world, a world filled with power and influence, something that intrigues her and temporarily distracts her from the pain of feeling neglected by her husband. In the quiet moments they spend together, they share laughter and secrets, and soon, those fleeting moments of connection evolve into something more profound, a forbidden affair that neither of them can truly comprehend at first. Sophie, in her state of vulnerability, is entranced by the allure of Harold, while he skillfully weaves a spell around her, exploiting her emotional fragility. The princess watches. She feels trapped and scared. And so the affair begins, a secret that blossoms in the shadows, hidden from the prying eyes of the world. As Sophie seeks solace in Harold's arms, she becomes entangled in a dangerous game, one that threatens to unravel everything she holds dear. The thrill of their connection is intoxicating, yet it is laced with the bitter taste of guilt and betrayal. What started as a quest for comfort and understanding quickly spirals into a whirlwind of emotions and consequences that neither of them could have ever predicted. Little do they know, the choices they make in these moments of vulnerability will alter the course of their lives forever. As the affair between Sophie and Harold deepens, the atmosphere around them shifts from one of excitement to an undercurrent of dread. What was once a source of comfort quickly transforms into a breeding ground for fear and uncertainty. It is during this tumultuous time that Sophie receives news that will alter her life forever, a diagnosis that sends shockwaves through her very being. Sitting in the sterile confines of the doctor's office, Sophie feels her heart race as the doctor's words hang heavy in the air. "You've tested positive for HIV." In that moment, time stands still. The news crashes over her like a tidal wave, pulling her under into a sea of confusion and despair. Tears brim in her eyes as she struggles to process the enormity of what she has just heard. Her thoughts spiral out of control. How could this happen? Who could she tell? What does this mean for her future, for her unborn child? As she leaves the office, the weight of the diagnosis feels unbearable. Sophie grapples with the reality of her situation, the fear of how this will affect her relationship with Jordan, and the shame that gnaws at her conscience. In her vulnerable state, she turns to Harold, seeking comfort and guidance. But instead of support, she finds something far more sinister. Harold, ever the manipulator, responds to her news with a chilling calmness. Rather than expressing genuine concern for Sophie's health, he quickly shifts into damage control mode. "You must keep this a secret," he insists, his voice laced with urgency. "The last thing we need is for this to get out. It could ruin everything." In that moment, Sophie feels the ground beneath her shift. The man who once provided her comfort now binds her with chains of secrecy and fear. Harold's pressure deepens her emotional turmoil, forcing her to hide the truth from Jordan, the man she loves and who is about to become a father. The walls of her world close in around her, isolating her further from the very people who should be her support system. She feels trapped in a nightmare of her own making, caught between the love for her husband and the dangerous liaison with Harold. Sophie's isolation grows as she navigates this treacherous landscape. The vibrant woman she once was begins to fade, replaced by a shell filled with anxiety and despair. The joy of her pregnancy, which should have been a time of celebration, is now overshadowed by the dark shadow of her affair and the fear of what lies ahead. Each day becomes a struggle as she fights against the rising tide of guilt and betrayal. She longs to confide in Jordan, to share her fears and insecurities, but the fear of losing him keeps her silent. The emotional conflict inside her rages like a storm, torn between the desire to come clean and the suffocating weight of her secret. Every moment she spends with Jordan is tinged with anxiety, each touch a reminder of the betrayal lurking just beneath the surface. As the days turn into weeks, Sophie feels the walls closing in. The deeper she sinks into this web of lies, the more desperate she becomes. She knows that love should never feel this way, filled with deception and heartache. Yet here she is, caught in a spiral of choices that seem impossible to escape. This is the beginning of the devastating consequences that will unravel their lives. The affair has ignited a chain reaction, and soon the truth will claw its way to the surface, shattering everything in its path. Stay with us as we witness the heartbreaking unraveling of trust, love, and the tragic fallout that follows. It was a quiet evening in the Kane household, the kind of evening that felt so ordinary it could lull anyone into a false sense of security. Jordan had come home late, as he often did, consumed by the demands of his campaign. The house was dark, save for the dim light coming from Sophie's phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter. Jordan, tired and distracted, wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a glass of water before heading to bed. But as he reached for the counter, his eyes caught the glow of a notification on Sophie's screen. It was a message from Harold. At first Jordan hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man to invade his wife's privacy, but something about the tone of the message, a line of text that seemed far too intimate, made his heart stop. With trembling hands, he unlocked the phone, his breath catching in his throat as he scrolled through the messages. What he found shattered him. Message after message, explicit and undeniable, painted a picture of betrayal so vivid it was impossible to ignore. There were declarations of passion, confessions of stolen moments, and even discussions about the baby she was carrying. His baby. Jordan's world tilted on its axis as the truth hit him like a freight train. His wife, the woman he loved and trusted, was having an affair. And not just with anyone, with Harold, his stepfather, his mentor, the man he had idolized for years. The phone slipped from Jordan's hands and clattered onto the counter. He stood there, frozen, his mind racing as anger, disbelief, and heartbreak collided all at once. His breathing grew heavy, his chest tightening with a mix of emotions he couldn't control. Every memory of Sophie, every moment they had shared, now felt like a cruel lie. Unable to contain the storm inside him, Jordan stormed into the bedroom, where Sophie was sitting quietly, her hands resting on her growing belly. She looked up at him, startled by the fire in his eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Jordan didn't answer right away. Instead, he threw the phone onto the bed, the incriminating messages still open on the screen. "Explain this," he demanded, his voice trembling with rage and pain. Sophie's face went pale as she realized what he had seen. She stammered, trying to find the right words, but there were none. The truth was out, and there was no way to take it back. "How long," Jordan shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions, "how long have you been lying to me? How long have you been with him, with Harold?" The name felt toxic on his tongue, like poison he couldn't spit out fast enough. Sophie broke down, tears streaming down her face as she tried to explain, to apologize, to justify the unjustifiable. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she sobbed. "I was lonely and you were so busy, and he was there for me." He frowned with disapproval, but her words only fueled Jordan's anger. His heartbreak turned into a fury he couldn't contain. He paced the room, his hands running through his hair, his mind spiraling as he tried to process the depth of the betrayal. "You were lonely," he shouted, "and you turned to him, my stepfather, the man I trusted more than anyone?" The argument escalated, emotions running high, as years of love, trust, and loyalty unraveled in a matter of minutes. Sophie begged for forgiveness, but Jordan, consumed by his pain, couldn't hear her. The betrayal was too much, too raw, too overwhelming. Then, in a moment neither of them could have predicted, everything reached a breaking point. Jordan, blinded by his rage and heartbreak, lashed out in a way that would haunt him forever. In the heat of the argument, as Sophie moved closer to him, pleading for him to listen, something inside him snapped. One moment they were arguing, voices echoing through the house, and the next, Sophie was on the ground, motionless. The silence that followed was deafening. Jordan stood there, frozen in place, staring at Sophie's lifeless body. His heart pounded in his chest, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on him like a tidal wave. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he tried to reach for her, to make sense of what he had just done. It wasn't supposed to end like this. None of it was. The woman he had loved, the woman he had dreamed of building a life with, was gone, and it was his fault. Jordan's mind spiraled as he grappled with the enormity of the moment. Pain, guilt, and disbelief consumed him, leaving him gasping for air as he knelt beside Sophie. The love he felt for her was still there, but now it was tangled with anger and regret, creating a suffocating mix of emotions he couldn't escape. In that moment, Jordan Kane was no longer the ambitious young politician on the rise. He was a broken man, standing in the wreckage of his own life, his heart shattered by betrayal, his hands stained with the consequences of his own actions. This was the turning point. The moment when everything unraveled, and the lives of everyone involved would never be the same again. Stay with us as we uncover what happened next, as the shocking aftermath of this tragedy comes to light, exposing the darkest depths of ambition, betrayal, and loss. In the aftermath of that tragic night, as the reality of Sophie's lifeless body settled into the corners of Jordan's mind, the air was thick with despair and disbelief. But even in that moment of unbearable grief, a familiar figure loomed at the threshold. Harold Kane, the very man who had orchestrated this chaotic symphony of betrayal. Harold arrived at the scene, his face a mask of feigned concern. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment, ready to step in and take control. Upon entering the room, he took in the sight before him, the broken man kneeling beside his wife, the weight of anguish visible in his eyes. But instead of offering solace, Harold's mind was racing, calculating the implications of what had just transpired. "Jordan," he said, his voice steady and commanding, "we need to talk." In that instant, the caring stepfather transformed into a cold strategist. He assessed the situation with the sharpness of a seasoned politician. "This cannot get out, you understand, don't you? If anyone finds out what really happened here, it will ruin everything we've built. Your career, my reputation, everything will be lost." Jordan, still reeling from the shock of his actions, barely grasped the gravity of Harold's words. He nodded, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. The idea of losing everything he had worked so hard for was terrifying, but the weight of his guilt felt even heavier. "We must stage this as an accident," Harold urged, his tone now urgent. "It's the only way to protect you and your future." With Harold's guidance, they concocted a chilling plan. They agreed to make it look like Sophie had tragically fallen during a late-night walk, a victim of a senseless accident. In a secluded area just outside the city, they would bury her, far away from prying eyes and the whispers of the community. The very thought sent chills down Jordan's spine, but the fear of exposure gripped him tightly. Together, they moved swiftly, their hearts heavy with the burden of their deception. Harold took charge, directing Jordan on how to arrange the scene, making it look as if Sophie had stumbled and met her untimely fate in the darkness. They worked in silence, the only sounds being the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the city. As they prepared to lay Sophie to rest, the weight of their actions loomed over them like a dark cloud. In that secluded spot, they dug a grave, a final resting place that would forever conceal the truth of what had transpired. As they lowered Sophie's body into the earth, a sense of finality washed over Jordan. He felt the weight of the world pressing down on him, realizing that this was not just a burial, it was the burial of his dreams, his love, and the truth. Harold's plan was now their reality, a twisted web of lies designed to protect their political futures at the cost of Sophie's legacy. With each shovelful of dirt that covered Sophie, Jordan felt a piece of himself disappear, buried alongside her. The deception had taken root, and as they finished their grim task, they stood together, two men united in their shared secret, but forever changed by the darkness they had embraced. Little did they know, the very cover-up they believed would shield them would soon unravel, exposing the haunting truth behind Sophie's death. Stay with us as we dive deeper into the investigation that follows, revealing the cracks in their deception and the eventual awakening of a community that would not remain in the dark. As the sun rose on a new day, casting a pale light over the city of Chicago, Jordan Kane faced the world with a mask of grief. In the wake of Sophie's tragic death, he knew he had to act quickly. With a heavy heart and a mind clouded by guilt, he made the excruciating decision to report his wife missing. Standing in front of the police station, Jordan felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling within him. He steeled himself, knowing that he had to craft a narrative that would evoke sympathy and support from the community. After all, he was a man with a promising political future, and the public needed to see him as a devoted husband, desperately searching for his lost wife. When he walked into that station, his voice trembled with false urgency as he recounted the story. "Sophie went for a late-night walk and she never came back," he told the officers, his eyes wide with feigned concern. "I've been searching everywhere for her. Please, you have to help me find her." The officers nodded, taking notes, and Jordan felt a flicker of hope mixed with the dread of what lay beneath his carefully crafted facade. As the news spread through the community, the reaction was swift. Neighbors rallied around Jordan, offering their support and organizing search parties. They brought food, sympathy, and prayers, everything a grieving husband could wish for. But behind the scenes, Jordan was acutely aware of the precarious nature of his situation. His narrative was shielding him from suspicion, creating an image of a loving spouse in turmoil. Yet, as the days passed and Sophie remained missing, the initial investigation began to run cold. The police conducted interviews and searched local parks, but every lead seemed to fade away into nothingness. Jordan continued to play his role, attending vigils and making public statements about the search for his wife, all while the truth lay buried in a secluded grave. The police were thorough, but they had no reason to suspect foul play. Jordan had woven a story so convincing that many in the community saw him as a tragic figure, a man suffering the unimaginable pain of losing his beloved wife. They gathered around him, offering their sympathy and support, unaware that the very man they were comforting was hiding a dark secret. As the investigation progressed, the police followed every lead they could find, but the truth remained elusive. The absence of evidence, combined with Jordan's compelling narrative, kept him safely in the spotlight, shielded from scrutiny. For months the investigation ran cold, even as whispers of Sophie's disappearance echoed through the neighborhood. Jordan felt a mix of relief and anxiety as the community continued to support him. He was living a lie, and every day that passed without the truth coming to light felt like a small victory. But deep down, he knew this fragile facade couldn't last forever. The weight of his actions loomed over him, a constant reminder that the darkness he had embraced would eventually claw its way to the surface. In the shadows of the investigation, as the police continued to follow leads that seemed to vanish into thin air, a local journalist named Emily Carter began to take a closer look at the story that had gripped the community. Emily was known for her relentless pursuit of the truth, a quality that had earned her both respect and a reputation for uncovering the hidden stories that others often overlooked. As she dug deeper into Sophie's disappearance, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than met the eye. The narrative painted by Jordan Kane, while compelling, felt oddly incomplete. With her investigative instincts kicking in, she started connecting the dots, reaching out to sources, and piecing together the timeline of events surrounding Sophie's last known whereabouts. What she discovered was alarming. Emily learned about the tumultuous relationship between Sophie and Jordan, the growing emotional distance, and the whispers of Harold's involvement. She began to question the public narrative, and the more she uncovered, the more convinced she became that something was deeply amiss. Then came the forensic evidence that would change everything. As the police continued their investigation, they sent samples from the burial site for analysis. What they found sent shockwaves through the case. The evidence revealed inconsistencies in Jordan's account of events, suggesting that he had lied about where and when Sophie had last been seen. The forensic team found traces of blood that didn't match Sophie's, raising questions about the true nature of her disappearance. With this new evidence in hand, the investigation shifted gears. But the real turning point came when surveillance footage was reviewed from a nearby camera. The footage captured a figure that matched Jordan's description near the burial site on the night of Sophie's disappearance. The sight of him wandering in the dark, so close to where they had buried her, sent chills down Emily's spine. This crucial piece of evidence escalated the investigation to new heights. As the police reviewed the footage over and over again, they realized that Jordan's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. The man who had painted himself as the grieving husband was now a person of interest, and the authorities began to connect the dots that Emily had been tirelessly pursuing. With every revelation, the stakes grew higher. The community that had rallied around Jordan now began to question the man they thought they knew. Emily's investigation had unearthed a tangled web of deception, and the truth was inching closer to the surface. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear that this tragic story was far from over. As the investigation intensified, the walls began to close in around Jordan Kane. With each passing day, the weight of his guilt became more unbearable, pressing down on him like a heavy shroud. The truth, once a distant specter he thought he could outrun, now loomed large and inescapable. He found himself haunted by the memories of Sophie. the laughter they once shared, and the love that had been so cruelly ripped away. Now, it was during one particularly sleepless night, consumed by anguish and regret, that Jordan reached his breaking point. The relentless pressure of the investigation, coupled with the damning evidence against him, pushed him to the edge. He could no longer bear the burden of the lies and the pain he had caused. In a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, he realized that the only way to begin to atone for his actions was to confess. With a heavy heart, Jordan walked into the police station, his hands trembling and his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to you," he said, his eyes filled with tears. As the officers listened, he began to recount the events of that fateful night, his voice breaking as he detailed the heated argument with Sophie that had escalated beyond his control. But as he spoke, something shifted within him. The truth, which had once felt so far out of reach, now spilled from his lips like a dam breaking. In a moment of raw honesty, he revealed not just his own role in Sophie's death, but also the part Harold had played in the cover-up. "It was him," Jordan confessed, his voice shaking. "Harold was there. He helped me hide it. We buried her together." With each word, the revelation of Harold's involvement shattered the illusion of the powerful patriarch who had orchestrated everything from behind the scenes. The very man who had once been a mentor to Jordan was now exposed as a complicit figure in a web of deceit that had ensnared them both. As the police processed his confession, the fallout was immediate and far-reaching. News of the confession spread like wildfire through the community, turning sympathy into shock and disbelief. Jordan's reputation as the grieving husband was irrevocably tarnished, and the public's perception of Harold Kane, once a revered political figure, crumbled before their eyes. The consequences of their actions were swift and devastating. Harold's political empire, built over decades of manipulation and ambition, began to collapse like a house of cards. His once influential presence in Chicago politics was swiftly diminished as calls for accountability and justice rang louder than ever. For both men, the weight of their confessions marked the end of their lives as they knew them. As the dust settled on this tragic chapter, the reality of betrayal, ambition, and loss began to sink in. In the wake of the shocking revelations surrounding her death, a wave of advocacy emerged, calling for greater accountability in the political realm. The events that unfolded in the lives of Jordan and Harold not only exposed the fragility of trust, but also highlighted the dire need for systems that protect individuals from the manipulations of those in power. As communities began to rally around Sophie's memory, her story became a rallying cry for those who had suffered in silence, urging society to take a stand against the corrupting influence of ambition and betrayal. This story was shared with us, though we promised to keep the names and location anonymous, respecting the privacy of those involved while shedding light on the deeper issues at play. It serves as a reminder that behind every headline lies a human story, filled with love, betrayal, and the harsh realities of life. Reflecting on the broader implications of this tale, we are left with profound lessons about the nature of trust and the need for accountability in all aspects of life, particularly in politics. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the lengths to which individuals will go to protect their interests, often at the expense of others. As we close this chapter, let us ponder the fragility of trust and the devastating cost of ambition. How easily relationships can be shattered and lives irrevocably altered when the pursuit of power takes precedence over compassion and integrity. And if you enjoyed this video and want more real-life crime stories that shine a light on the complexities of human nature, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Your support helps us continue to share these important narratives with the world. Thank you for joining us, and remember, every story has the power to teach us something new.